In the quiet and seemingly peaceful town in Texas, the life of 14-year-old Jacob Mason looked normal on the outside. Like many teenagers, he went to school, hung out with friends, and lived with his parents, Michael and Sarah. But beneath this ordinary facade, Jacob was harboring a dangerous secret, a growing obsession with gambling. What began as harmless curiosity soon spiraled into an addiction that consumed him. From online poker games to local casinos, Jacob was chasing quick thrills and fast money. His parents noticed his mounting debts and erratic behavior, but felt helpless. This hidden gamble would eventually explode into a nightmare, culminating in a violent act that shocked the entire community. Today, we explore the dark path of a boy caught between addiction, anger, and a tragic choice. Jacob was, on the surface, a typical teenager, a boy of average height with scruffy dark hair that often fell into his eyes, giving him a slightly disheveled look. He carried himself with a quiet demeanor that few understood was merely a mask for the turmoil brewing beneath. Those who knew him described him as reserved, sometimes distant, rarely the center of attention. Yet inside, Jacob wrestled with a growing obsession that would soon consume much of his young life. His parents, Michael and Sarah Mason, were hard-working, devoted individuals who wanted nothing more than to provide a stable and loving environment for their son. Michael worked long hours at a manufacturing plant, while Sarah balanced her job as a school teacher with managing the household. They did their best to support Jacob, encouraging him in school and extracurricular activity. Part of their effort included giving him a modest allowance to cover personal expenses, snacks, small outings with friends, or the occasional video game purchase. It was a trust they extended, hoping to teach responsibility. However, everything changed the day Jacob discovered gambling. It began innocently enough, with casual bets on online games and friendly wagers with peers. The thrill of risk and the tantalizing prospect of winning money captivated him quickly. At first, the stakes were low, mere pennies or dollars, but the pull was magnetic. As days turned into weeks, the bets grew bolder, and the allure of gambling seeped deeper into Jacob's life. What started as a passing interest became an all-consuming addiction. Jacob spent countless hours online, scouring websites, entering virtual poker rooms, spinning digital roulette wheels, and placing bets on sports games. He learned quickly, mastering the mechanics and strategies to increase his chances, but luck was elusive. The losses piled up, yet the hope of a big win kept him hooked. He became skilled at hiding this obsession from his teachers and friends. At school, he maintained a calm exterior, hiding the anxiety and desperation that gnawed at him during quiet moments. At home, however, the cracks began to show. The allowance Jacob received was no longer enough to feed his growing habit. He started borrowing money, promising to pay it back, but rarely doing so. Michael and Sarah noticed his increasingly secretive behavior, disappearing for long stretches on his phone, avoiding eye contact, and becoming defensive when questioned. Despite their concern, they initially hoped he was just going through a phase. Eventually, the truth came out. Through a combination of overheard conversations, bank statements, and discovery of online accounts, Michael and Sarah realized the depth of Jacob's problem. The boy they thought they knew was deeply entangled in gambling, squandering money and neglecting responsibilities. It was a painful revelation, and they were faced with a difficult choice. Determined to stop the downward spiral, they decided to cut off Jacob's allowance completely, hoping that financial restraint would break the addictive cycle. The decision, while made with love and concern, ignited a fierce response. Jacob felt betrayed and cornered. The small freedom he had enjoyed was taken away, and with it, his frustration exploded. Resentment grew like a wildfire inside him, fueled by feelings of anger, isolation, and helplessness. Instead of seeking help or opening up, he retreated further into secrecy and bitterness. This pivotal moment marked a turning point in the Mason family's life. The once relatively peaceful household became a place of tension and simmering conflict. Jacob's gambling addiction was no longer just a hidden vice. It had become a source of division and despair. The struggles of a teenager wrestling with addiction, coupled with parental attempts to control and protect, created a volatile environment, one that would ultimately lead to tragic consequences. The story of Jacob's early days with gambling is a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly minor interest can spiral into a dangerous addiction. It highlights the challenges families face when confronting such issues, especially when the person struggling is so young and vulnerable. The mix of love, frustration, and fear that defined the Mason household during this time paints a poignant picture of the battle between control and chaos, responsibility. Jacob's journey at this stage was a complex interplay of youthful defiance and deep-seated pain. His ability to conceal his addiction masked the true extent of his suffering, leaving those around him unaware of the storm building within. Michael and Sarah's well-intentioned but ultimately insufficient response set the stage for the events that would follow, underscoring the need for understanding, early intervention, and comprehensive support for young people caught in the grip of addiction. This phase in Jacob's life encapsulates the fragility of adolescence, where small decisions can lead down unforeseen and dangerous paths. The hope remains that through awareness and compassion, families facing similar struggles can find ways to prevent tragedy and guide their loved ones back toward healing and stability. The Mason household, once a place of quiet routines and subtle familial rhythms, gradually became enveloped in a thick, suffocating atmosphere of tension and unresolved conflict. The warmth and normalcy that had characterized their daily lives began to erode, replaced by an underlying current of anxiety and despair. Central to this growing discord was the issue of money, but not simply financial strain as one might expect. Rather, it was the destructive grip of Jacob's reckless gambling habit and the resulting pressure it placed on the family's already stretched resources. Arguments over money escalated with alarming frequency, each more heated and desperate than the last, until they became a constant backdrop to life in the Mason home. Michael Mason, a hard-working factory employee, carried the weight of long hours and physical fatigue, yet he remained steadfast in his efforts to maintain order and provide for his family. Sarah, a devoted schoolteacher balancing the demands of her career with the needs of her son and household, found herself drained emotionally and physically by the mounting stress. Together, they faced the exhausting cycle of confrontations with Jacob, their voices often pleading but increasingly edged with frustration and fear. They implored him to recognize the damage his addiction was causing, not just to their finances, but to the fragile fabric of their family, and to seek help before the situation spiraled further out of control. But despite their efforts, their words too often seemed to dissolve into a void, unheard and unheeded by their son. For Jacob, anger became a consuming force, one that roiled both outwardly and inwardly. His fury was directed at the world, at his parents, and, most painfully, at himself. The restriction imposed by the cessation of his allowance felt like imprisonment, a barrier to the escape he sought through gambling. He was furious at his own inability to resist the lure of betting, to break free from the compulsion that dominated his thoughts and controlled his actions. This internal battle left him feeling isolated, trapped within a cycle of addiction and blame, unable to find an outlet or a path forward. The accusations and disappointment from Michael and Sarah only deepened his sense of alienation, feeding a growing resentment that simmered beneath the surface, ready to explode. The simmering storm that had been building finally reached its breaking point one fateful evening. The Mason family gathered in their modest kitchen, an ordinary space that had witnessed countless meals, conversations, and moments of connection. But that night, the air was thick with unspoken grievances and mounting tension. The silence was shattered by sharp, escalating words as the topic of money ignited a bitter confrontation. What began as a discussion devolved into accusations and recriminations, each person's pain and frustration spilling over into anger and desperation. Jacob's eyes, usually reserved, now blazed with a dangerous intensity. His fists clenched tightly, his breath coming in uneven gasps. Michael and Sarah, weary yet determined, attempted to reach out to calm the rising storm, but their efforts were too late. The emotional dam had burst. In the height of this charged moment, Jacob's hand shot out toward the kitchen counter, where a simple knife lay amidst the everyday clutter of family life. This unassuming tool, once used for chopping vegetables or slicing bread, was transformed in an instant into a weapon of despair and violence. Fueled by a torrent of rage and helplessness, Jacob's actions turned the quiet kitchen into a chaotic scene of terror. What followed was a series of brutal moments that would irrevocably change the lives of the Mason family, leaving scars both physical and emotional that would endure far beyond that night. This night marked a devastating turning point, not just for the Masons, but for the entire community that had once seen them as a picture of ordinary family life. The tragedy shattered the fragile illusion of normalcy and forced a reckoning with the harsh realities of addiction, fractured family relationships, and the profound consequences that come when emotional turmoil is ignored or left unaddressed. The violence was not a spontaneous act, but the tragic climax of a long, painful struggle that had been simmering beneath the surface, unseen or overlooked by those who might have intervened. In the wake of that night, the town was left reeling. Neighbors who had greeted the Masons with familiarity now grappled with disbelief and sorrow, struggling to reconcile the image of a young boy they had watched grow with the violent act he had committed. Questions echoed through the community. How could such darkness dwell in one so young? What pressures had been too great? What cries for help too faint to be heard? These questions spurred conversations in homes, schools, and public spaces, fostering a collective examination of the dangers facing today's youth, particularly the seductive pull of addiction and the critical importance of mental health support and early intervention. Jacob's breaking point illustrated all too starkly the destructive potential of unrestrained anger and unhealed pain. His actions highlighted an urgent need for empathy and proactive engagement with young people caught in similar struggles. That violent night served as a somber reminder that despair, if left unchecked, can erupt into disaster, underscoring how the interplay of addiction, familial tension, and mental health can create environments ripe for tragedy. The consequences of that evening forever altered the Mason family's trajectory. The pain and loss radiated outward, touching not only their lives, but also those of their friends, neighbors, and the wider community. It became a grim symbol of the fragility of family bonds under stress and the high cost of breakdowns in communication and control. The tragedy served as a wake-up call for many, encouraging deeper reflection on how communities can better support their young members, especially those fighting hidden battles beneath a veneer of normalcy. Ultimately, this chapter in the Mason family's life is not only a story of violence, but also one of missed chances, moments where understanding, compassion, and intervention might have changed the course of events. It challenges us to look beyond headlines and statistics, to see the fragile humanity at the core of such tragedies, and to commit ourselves to fostering environments where young people can find hope, healing, and help before it is too late. The night that shattered the Mason household was cloaked in darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The quiet calm that had once characterized the home was ripped apart by a storm of emotions too powerful to contain. What began as a tempest of anger, desperation, and the tangled web of Jacob's gambling addiction erupted into a catastrophic event that would haunt the family and community forever. That evening, fueled by years of frustration and emotional turmoil, Jacob's actions spiraled into irreversible tragedy. In the depths of that night, the boy, who had seemed so ordinary to neighbors and friends, revealed the fierce storm raging within. His grasp on rationality had been eroded by the crushing weight of his addiction and the resentment he harbored toward his parents, Michael and Sarah. Consumed by a sense of betrayal and hopelessness, Jacob reached for the kitchen knife, a tool of daily life that instantly transformed into a weapon of destruction in his hands. The cold steel, once used for simple tasks like slicing bread or chopping vegetables, became an instrument of pain and violence. The confrontation was sudden and violent. There was no time for words to soothe or reason to prevail. Jacob's rage, pent up and volatile, manifested in a series of brutal acts that left his parents gravely injured. Michael, worn from years of hard work and dedication to his family, was caught off guard, his defenses no match for the fury unleashed upon him. Sarah, equally stunned by the sudden violence, bore the shock of the attack with a mix of fear and disbelief. The house, which once echoed with laughter, conversations, and the mundane sounds of family life, became a scene marked by chaos and terror. The neighbors, disturbed by the sounds of struggle and cries that pierced the night, acted quickly. Their concern led them to call 911, summoning emergency responders who arrived to a scene that was already unfolding into a nightmare. The paramedics and police officers entered a home, transformed from a sanctuary into a place of horror. Michael and Sarah were rushed to the hospital, their condition severe and uncertain. The quiet suburb, accustomed to peace and normalcy, was jolted into a state of shock and disbelief. For the community, the news was devastating. How could a boy so young, someone they had seen growing up on their streets, be responsible for such violence? The questions swirled through conversations at churches, schools, and neighborhood gatherings. The tragedy was not only an event, but a painful awakening to the hidden struggles that could exist behind closed doors. It exposed the fragility of family bonds and the deep impact of addiction and unaddressed emotional pain. The night's horror was more than a simple crime. It was a desperate cry for help that had gone unheard for too long. Jacob's actions were the culmination of months, perhaps years, of inner conflict, frustration, and isolation. The violence was a tragic expression of a young mind overwhelmed by forces it could not control. It underscored the urgent need for greater awareness and intervention to support vulnerable youth before such tragedies unfold. In the days that followed, the Mason family's story dominated local news and community discourse. The focus was not only on the violence itself, but on the underlying causes that led to this fateful night. Discussions turned toward the importance of mental health resources, the dangers of adolescent addiction, and the challenges faced by families trying to protect their children while grappling with their own limitations. The tragedy highlighted gaps in support systems and raised critical questions about how such devastating outcomes might be prevented in the future. The aftermath of that night left lasting scars, both visible and invisible. Michael and Sarah's injuries became a testament to the brutal reality of the event, while Jacob's emotional and psychological state came under intense scrutiny. The community mourned the loss of safety and innocence, grappling with the stark reality that even the most ordinary lives could be shattered by unseen struggles. This night remains a somber reminder of the consequences when pain and addiction are left to fester in silence. It is a call to action for families, educators, and communities to recognize the signs of distress and to offer support before despair leads to tragedy. The Mason family's experience serves as a powerful lesson on the need for compassion, vigilance, and timely intervention, essential elements in protecting the fragile lives of young people navigating difficult paths. Though the darkness of that night was overwhelming, it also sparked a movement within the community, a renewed commitment to understanding, healing, and preventing such horrors. It challenged everyone to look deeper, listen more carefully, and act more decisively. For Jacob, Michael, Sarah, and the town that bore witness to this tragedy, the hope lies in the lessons learned and the collective resolve to build a safer, more compassionate future. The moment the police were alerted to the horrifying events at the Mason household, they responded swiftly and with utmost seriousness. The gravity of the situation was immediately apparent. A violent act had shattered the quietness of the Texas town, and it was clear that a thorough and meticulous investigation was required to uncover the truth. Upon arriving at the scene, officers moved with a sense of urgency, yet exercised careful precision, understanding that the details they gathered would be crucial in piecing together the narrative of what had transpired. The crime scene was secured to preserve every possible piece of evidence. Forensic teams worked tirelessly, examining the house for traces of blood, fingerprints, and any items that could shed light on the sequence of events. Every corner was scrutinized, from the kitchen counter where the knife was taken to the surrounding rooms where the confrontation had unfolded. The investigators documented everything with photographs and detailed notes, ensuring that no detail, no matter how small, would be overlooked. This painstaking process was essential not only to build a factual account, but also to uphold the integrity of the investigation. Meanwhile, detectives began interviewing witnesses, neighbors who had heard the commotion, friends who had noticed changes in Jacob's behavior, and family members who could provide context to the troubled young boy's life. These testimonies painted a complex picture of a family struggling under the weight of unspoken pain and addiction. Slowly, a narrative emerged of a boy whose life had been overtaken by compulsive gambling and whose emotions had become a volatile mix of anger, fear, and isolation. Jacob was taken into custody without incident. The weight of what had occurred hung heavily over him, but it was clear from the outset that this was a case far more complex than a simple act of violence. The investigation delved deeper, revealing the extent to which Jacob's gambling addiction had consumed his life. Authorities discovered his extensive online activities, hours spent searching for games, placing bets, and chasing wins. The addiction had not only drained his finances, but also eroded his mental health, leaving him vulnerable to despair and irrational behavior. Law enforcement officials found themselves confronted with a painful truth that was becoming increasingly evident in communities across the country. Addiction and untreated mental health issues can have devastating consequences, even among the very young. Jacob's case was a stark illustration of this reality. It highlighted how a combination of compulsive behavior, emotional distress, and lack of adequate support could culminate in tragedy. Officers, detectives, and social workers alike grappled with the knowledge that behind the violent act was a vulnerable adolescent crying out for help that came too late. The arrest of Jacob Mason sent shockwaves throughout the community. Neighbors who had once casually waved to the boy were now forced to confront the harrowing reality that someone so young could commit such a heinous act. The news reverberated beyond the town, stirring conversations about the broader societal issues at play. Questions flooded in about what might have been done differently to prevent the tragedy. Were there warning signs that were missed? Could intervention programs have made a difference? How could families and communities better support young people struggling with addiction and mental health challenges? These difficult questions sparked important debates among community leaders, educators, and policymakers. The case underscored the need for comprehensive prevention strategies that address not only the symptoms but the root causes of adolescent addiction and emotional turmoil. Mental health services for youth were recognized as a critical component of these strategies, along with educational programs designed to raise awareness about the dangers of gambling and the importance of early intervention. Accountability became a central theme in public discourse. While Jacob's actions were undeniably tragic and harmful, there was also recognition that he was a victim of circumstances that extended beyond his control. The balance between holding him responsible and understanding his vulnerabilities became a nuanced discussion in courts, schools, and community forums. The case challenged everyone involved to think critically about justice, rehabilitation, and the roles of families, schools, and social services in protecting young people. Throughout the investigation, law enforcement agencies worked collaboratively with mental health professionals to ensure that the approach to Jacob's case was holistic and informed. They sought not only to bring clarity and resolution to the crime, but also to contribute to the healing process for the family and community. This cooperation highlighted the evolving understanding that crimes rooted in addiction and psychological distress require responses that go beyond traditional law enforcement methods. The Mason case served as a wake-up call, a painful reminder of the hidden struggles that can lie beneath the surface of ordinary lives. It exposed the critical gaps in the support systems available to adolescents facing addiction and emotional crises, and prompted calls for systemic reforms. The tragedy underscored the urgency of creating environments where young people can seek help without fear of judgment, and where families are equipped with the resources to intervene effectively. In the end, the investigation into the horrific night at the Mason home was more than a search for facts. It was a journey into the complexities of youth addiction, mental health, and family dynamics. It revealed how intertwined these issues can be and how essential it is for communities to respond with compassion, knowledge, and proactive care. The story of Jacob Mason remains a somber testament to the consequences of unchecked pain and the profound need for vigilance and support in safeguarding the futures of vulnerable youth. This case continues to resonate as a powerful lesson, a call to action for families, educators, healthcare providers, and policymakers to work together in identifying, understanding, and addressing the silent battles many young people face. It challenges society to move beyond condemnation and toward prevention, healing, and hope. ensuring that no other adolescent suffers alone in the shadows of addiction and despair. The quiet streets of the small Texas town were shaken to their core by the tragedy that unfolded within the Mason household. For a community where everyone knew each other, the news hit like a thunderclap. Friends who had once shared laughter and simple moments with Jacob struggled to reconcile the boy they thought they knew. The shy, somewhat withdrawn teenager with the violent actions that had shattered their sense of safety. Parents, neighbors, and community members found themselves grappling with a painful dissonance, torn between disbelief and sorrow. The extended Mason family bore a heavy burden. Michael and Sarah's relatives gathered to mourn not only the physical wounds their loved ones sustained, but also the emotional scars that the incident had inflicted on everyone involved. The pain radiated outward, touching every corner of the family's circle. Family gatherings became somber affairs, filled with shared grief and a haunting question: how had things come to this? As the community processed the shock, it became clear that this tragedy was not an isolated incident, but a stark reflection of deeper issues simmering beneath the town's surface. Conversations began to emerge around the hidden dangers of adolescent gambling, a problem that many had underestimated or overlooked. Parents admitted their own uncertainties about recognizing the signs of addiction in their children, and the pressures facing teenagers in an increasingly complex world became a focal point of discussion. Mental health awareness, once a topic whispered only in private, gained newfound prominence. The Mason case acted as a catalyst, inspiring local activists, educators, and community leaders to band together in pursuit of solutions. Forums were organized where families could come forward and share their experiences, seeking understanding and support. These gatherings provided a space for education on addiction, emotional well-being, and the challenges young people face in managing stress, peer pressure, and mental health struggles. Support groups began to take shape, offering resources for parents and teens alike. Trained counselors and mental health professionals volunteered their time to help families navigate the often difficult path toward healing and prevention. Schools introduced programs designed to educate students about the risks of gambling and the importance of seeking help early. Churches opened their doors to community meetings that combined spiritual support with practical advice on coping with addiction and emotional crises. The ripple effect of these efforts was felt in every part of the town. Conversations about mental health and addiction spread beyond formal meetings, entering homes, workplaces, and casual encounters. Neighbors checked in on one another with renewed concern, and a sense of collective responsibility took root. The town began to move from a place of shock and mourning to one of proactive engagement, determined to prevent another tragedy from happening. Amid this growing awareness, the Mason family story became emblematic of issues often hidden in the shadows, issues that many preferred not to confront, but that demanded attention. It shone a light on the challenges of recognizing and addressing adolescent addiction and mental health struggles, especially in tight-knit communities where privacy and appearances often take precedence over open dialogue. The tragedy sparked a broader reflection on how communities support their young people. It highlighted the necessity of breaking down stigmas surrounding mental health and addiction, encouraging open conversations that can lead to early intervention and support. The Mason case underscored that prevention requires not only individual effort, but also systemic changes in education, healthcare, and social services. The journey of this small town in the wake of the tragedy illustrates the power of community resilience and the importance of coming together in the face of hardship. While the pain of what happened will never fully fade, the collective commitment to learning from it and fostering a safer, more compassionate environment offers hope. The story of Jacob Mason and his family became a beacon, urging everyone to pay closer attention to the hidden struggles within their own neighborhoods and to act before despair turns to disaster. Ultimately, the tragedy opened a door to healing and change. It transformed grief into purpose and silence into conversation. The Mason family's ordeal, painful as it was, became a call to action, a reminder that by supporting one another and addressing the difficult realities of addiction and mental health, a community can rise stronger and more united. The town's experience stands as a testament to the enduring human spirit and the potential for transformation that lies within collective awareness and care. Jacob Mason's story stands as a haunting and powerful testament to the devastating impact that addiction can have on a young life when left unchecked and untreated. It is a narrative woven with the threads of pain, frustration, and missed opportunities. An illustration of how emotional suffering, if ignored, can escalate into tragic consequences not only for the individual, but for their entire community. The tale of Jacob is more than just an account of one boy's downfall. It is a sobering lesson about the urgent need for early intervention and the creation of support systems that can protect vulnerable youth from spiraling into destructive behaviors. The destructive power of addiction is often underestimated, especially when it strikes someone so young. For Jacob, gambling began as a form of escapism, a way to cope with pressures and insecurities that felt overwhelming. However, what started as a seemingly harmless pastime soon became a relentless force controlling his thoughts and actions. Addiction isolates, distorts reality, and erodes the ability to make sound decisions. Jacob's story vividly demonstrates this insidious progression, showing how an adolescent lacking the tools and support to manage his inner turmoil became trapped in a cycle of compulsion and despair. This tragedy underscores the critical importance of recognizing early warning signs. Families, educators, and communities play pivotal roles in observing and responding to changes in a young person's behavior. Subtle indicators, withdrawal from loved ones, secrecy, sudden financial problems, mood swings can all signal that something is wrong. Had there been more awareness and openness in Jacob's life, perhaps the spiral could have been interrupted. His case reminds us that silence and stigma often compound the problem, allowing pain to fester in isolation rather than being met with understanding and assistance. Open communication emerges as one of the most vital elements in preventing such tragedies. A young person struggling with addiction or emotional pain must feel safe enough to express their fears and frustrations without fear of judgment or punishment. This requires a cultural shift in families and communities toward empathy, patience, and active listening. Jacob's descent was marked by an absence of this supportive dialogue. Instead, he faced restrictions and confrontations that, while motivated by care, inadvertently deepened his sense of alienation. The lesson here is clear: punishment alone cannot heal. Healing begins with connection. Equally essential are robust support systems tailored to the needs of youth at risk. These include accessible mental health services, counseling programs, addiction treatment, and educational initiatives that address the complexities of adolescent struggles. Schools can serve as critical hubs for these services, providing safe spaces and trained professionals who understand the unique challenges of adolescence. Communities must prioritize funding and resources for these programs, ensuring no young person falls through the cracks due to lack of help. Jacob's story also calls attention to the broader societal context in which such personal tragedies unfold. It highlights the intersection of mental health, addiction, and social pressures that many young people face. Economic hardship, family stress, peer influence, and cultural attitudes toward addiction all shape the environment in which vulnerability grows. Addressing these systemic factors is crucial for building resilience and providing pathways to recovery. Behind every shocking headline about violence or tragedy lies a human being, a complex, vulnerable individual whose pain and struggles are often invisible until it's too late. Jacob was no exception. His actions, as horrifying as they were, stemmed from a place of deep suffering. Recognizing the humanity in these stories compels us to act with compassion rather than condemnation, to seek understanding rather than alienation. By learning from Jacob's story, we gain valuable insights into how to better protect and nurture our youth. It teaches us to be vigilant and proactive, to engage with young people empathetically, and to build networks of care that address both immediate crises and long-term well-being. It challenges families and communities to dismantle the stigmas that silence conversations about addiction and mental health, replacing fear with knowledge and hope. Ultimately, Jacob Mason's story is a call to action. It demands that we confront the realities of addiction and emotional pain head on, that we invest in prevention and support, and that we commit to creating a world where no child's life spirals into tragedy. This commitment is not only a responsibility, but a moral imperative, one that honors the potential of every young person and protects the future of our communities. In this pursuit, we must remember that prevention and healing require patience, understanding, and sustained effort. Success is measured not only by the absence of tragedy, but by the presence of hope, resilience, and connection. Jacob's experience, as painful as it is, can serve as a guiding light, illuminating the path toward a safer, more compassionate society where every young person has the chance to thrive beyond their struggles. This story reminds us all that addiction is not a choice, but a disease that demands our empathy and action. Mental health is not a luxury, but a necessary for healthy development. Together, through education, communication, and care, we can break the cycles of despair and build a future grounded in support, dignity, and hope for all youth.